What is good, YouTube family? Welcome back to the channel. So today's video, we will be covering more of the NWO documentary that we started watching. I think it was a couple episodes ago. So the first episode, we got the introduction on Scott Hall and how he left WWE, went to WCW. And now we're about to get, I believe we're about to get into the official forming of the NWO and WCW. So with that, let's get to it.
Companies were able to settle out of court. There's much more to this lawsuit and we could literally talk for hours about it, so let's move on. WCW were not allowed to mention that any future NWO members were previously hired by the World Wrestling Federation, leading to the WWF trying and failing to get the last laugh with the fake Razor Ramon and fake Diesel characters on WWF television.
And that was Kane. So Kane was actually fake Diesel, which when I found that out, boy, that had me dying. Lord, he brought his career back.
A shining example of Vince McMahon's pettiness here. Ironically, when it was announced that Razor and Diesel would return to the WWF just before we were introduced to these fake versions, Scott and Kevin got a pay rise in WCW. Hall and Nash were signed to what was known in WCW as deal memos, pretty much a preliminary contract that outlines the legalities of the working agreement between the company and the worker, but signing a deal memo isn't the same as signing your final contract. Hall and Nash could, in theory, return to the WWF at any time before their legitimate final contracts had been signed. So when the WWF said that Razor and Diesel would return on television, WCW panicked, pushing more money in the faces of Nash and Hall in order to expedite the signing of their final WCW contracts. So Vince McMahon's pettiness over the Razor and Diesel characters actually led to the real Kevin Nash and Scott Hall getting paid more money in WCW.
Dang.
It's truly an unbelievable and remarkable tale of Vince McMahon constantly shooting himself in the foot.
That's crazy. He gave him more money.
The real Razor Ramon and Diesel would use their real names in WCW, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash respectively, and the WWF couldn't really stop WCW from going ahead with the storyline as long as WCW didn't exploit the fact that Hall and Nash, along with the whole NWO, were former WWF guys. At the Great American Bash then, the Outsiders would not have a match. As previously mentioned, Eric asked both Hall and Nash if they worked for the WWF. Both men said no. Eric then said that 3 WCW guys would face Hall, Nash and their third mystery partner at Bash at the Beach 1996. But Hall and Nash got pissed off when Eric wouldn't reveal who would represent WCW in the 6-man tag. Eric ended up taking a jackknife powerbomb to end the segment.
Yeesh.
Mean Gene Okerlund announced the next night on Monday Nitro that Sting, Lex Luger and Randy Savage would be the 3 men representing WCW at Bash at the Beach. Nash and Hall, now known as the Outsiders, were still a man down though, and I'm not going to go into great detail regarding Hulk Hogan, by the way. It's already been covered and you guys, I'm sure, all know the story. But the big question leading up to Bash at the Beach now was, who is this mystery third partner who would be siding with Hall and Nash? Again, you guys know the story, but let's wrap things up here and focus on what the Outsiders got up to right before the Bash at the Beach pay-per-view. On the June 24th edition of Nitro, we had a good triple team tag match, the Steiners versus Harlem Heat versus Lex Luger and Sting. Towards the end of the match, the Outsiders made their way to the ring through the audience. A bunch of security guys stormed the ring to make sure Hall and Nash couldn't interfere in the main event, but the damage was already done. The Outsiders had pretty much put an end to the Nitro main event, bringing WCW's flagship show to a complete standstill. Hall and Nash bought tickets to the July 1st, 1996 episode of Nitro, meaning WCW security were unable to throw the Outsiders out of the building. The guys couldn't help themselves though. Hall and Nash grabbed a microphone and started patronising Eric Bischoff. As the Outsiders were approaching the commentary table, the WCW locker room emptied. Babyfaces and heels, who would normally be squaring off against each other, all came out to ensure Hall and Nash couldn't get any closer. Eventually, security got rid of the Outsiders, and the show ended with the security guys forcing Hall and Nash to get in their car and leave the arena. That Sunday, the hostile
Dang.
takeover was booked for Bash at the Beach. Hall and Nash had their very first match since returning to WCW, and
That's
history was made when
crazy,
Hulk Hogan
man.
joined the Outsiders and the New World Order was born.
Oh man, so if you haven't checked out WWE's documentary, their series Evil, their first episode is Hulk Hogan, and it's themed around his heel turn in this at Bash at the Beach. When I tell you, I learned so much watching that. I didn't realize how big a deal it was. I think I was like 6 years old when this happened. I didn't realize how big a deal it was for him to turn heel and all the behind the scenes like worries and like the conversations that was going on behind the scenes for this moment to happen, and who they had in mind if Hogan didn't go through with it. Y'all should definitely check that out. But man, when I tell you, man, it puts everything in perspective, and just from learning everything in hindsight, I just can't imagine how crazy it was when this was live. But man, this iconic.
And so, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall had ushered in a new era for WCW, an era based on Eric Bischoff's vision, and an era that changed the course of professional wrestling itself. I don't think I need to explain how important the New World Order was to wrestling in the 90s.
Oh,
The
man.
Outsiders would become one of WCW's most successful tag teams, capturing the tag titles 6 times while gaining a huge fan following, thanks to how WCW presented the New World Order as cool villains. After some time, Shawn
Six
Michaels
Pac.
and Triple H formed their own tag team that, when you think about it, really did have a lot of similarities when comparing to the Outsiders.
Yeah.
Both teams included members of the Clique, both teams were heels but they got cheered for being rebellious, and both teams used their backstage stroke to further their own standing within the company. People today call this a bad thing, and maybe it is, but when you talk about producing results, setting legitimate trends and breaking new ground, well, both the Outsiders and the original D-Generation X done all of these things. The Outsiders, however, maybe struggled with longevity, but that's something we can look at in another video. Something I did take away here though when watching this all back was how WCW completely altered their presentation when Hall and Nash would make appearances just to make it feel real. I watch a lot of old WCW Nitro episodes and these things may appear subtle to your average viewer, but commentators would immediately change their tone when talking about Hall and Nash. Pre-recorded videos about completely unassociated wrestlers would end abruptly if the Outsiders made an appearance. WCW even...
See, and that's what makes it more believable, because it's like, oh, the bullies, it's like Debo here. It's tuck your chains, it's time to go. Like, it's those little subtle things that can make or break a segment. Like, if your goal is to push believability and push realism, those little subtle, like you said, the voice changing, people grabbing their stuff and piecing out, like that it's like the boogeyman is coming. Like if you can portray that on camera and make us, the audience, feel it, that's good TV. Especially when it's like it's live or it's even if it's recorded. I mean, still being able to put that or to make the viewer feel or trigger an emotion with them. That's top tier.
Used camera angles that were never used before when Hall and
that's
Nash
smart.
showed up. We saw more of the arena. We saw things that weren't part of the regular broadcast.
Man, they made that look
subtle
real.
Changes made a huge difference.
Yeah.
Look out for this if you decide to go back and relive this time period in WCW.
He was helpless. Man, this man was supposed to be in the NBA Finals and he on dang WCW. Dennis Rodman was a trip.
In today's video, we're going to take a look at Hulk Hogan's first year in the New World Order. Hulk Hogan by far is the most requested superstar on this channel, and I feel that making a one and done video for Hulk Hogan would be both impossible and unfair. The man means so much to wrestling and has done so much during his active years that I feel the best thing to do would be to look at certain time periods of his career. Hogan will appear on this channel at different times. We won't spend weeks on Hogan because, well, although he is the most requested superstar, not everyone wants to see consecutive videos for weeks based on one guy. So let's start at one of the more interesting time periods for Hulk Hogan, the first year of the extremely successful and lucrative New World Order in WCW. In the summer of 1996, Hulk Hogan was able to reignite his career when he became a bad guy in wrestling. For over a decade, the Hulkster had been telling us to eat our vitamins and say our prayers as he portrayed the all-American hero on television screens to great success.
Yeah.
Hulk was smart enough to notice that times had changed even by mid-1996. People were getting tired of the same old Hulk Hogan, and people were now starting to get behind the concept of cool villains in wrestling. Hogan's audience receptions, before becoming a bad guy, had been good but nowhere near as great as what they once were. I don't think Hogan would have ever faded into obscurity had he not joined the New World Order, but I do agree that Hulk Hogan and the red and yellow stuff was getting quite tiresome.
Well, I mean, that's with us as humans, period. Like, we evolve. Too much of the same thing gets old. If you eat the same meal for 7 days straight, by day 8, you're tired of it. If we keep seeing this great guy just keeps getting pushed and pushed further and further in our faces, eventually we're going to want something different. And it is cool. It's very cool to root for the evil guy. My favorite movie still to this day, Spider-Man is close second, but my favorite movie to this day is The Dark Knight. And it's not because of Christian Bale, who did a great job playing Batman, but it was Heath Ledger playing the Joker. So like, that in itself is just something about us that we're drawn to the villain. And then if we see a good guy go bad, for some reason, I don't know, it works, especially in sports entertainment.
You have to understand that Hogan did not have to join the NWO in order to remain financially stable within WCW. Looking over Hogan's contract at the time, we can see that the guy was making serious money from...
I ain't mean to hit the camera, but that says, in consideration of his performance, WCW shall pay him a bonus in the amount of $2 million within 14 days of his execution and delivery of this letter of agreement. So he was about to get a $2 million bonus. Let's see, he will promote, appear, and wrestle and perform at 6 pay-per-view events during year 1 through year 3 of this agreement. And he will be the featured wrestler at each of his events. And I think too that one of the things is he got, wait. Before I say that, in consideration of his participation, WCW shall compensate him the greater of 15% of 100% of domestic pay-per-view sales received by WCW. That's a lot of math. But yeah, also on top of that, he got creative control. So Hogan was set, like, understatement.
From the day he joined the company. What is interesting though is Hulk Hogan's WCW incentives, his bonuses within the company. In the most basic terms, Hogan got 15% of pay-per-view buys as a financial bonus, and if buy rates were particularly high for WCW domestic pay-per-views, Hogan got paid even bigger amounts of money based on the success of each individual show. Hogan also got 25% of ticket sales for every Nitro and Thunder show that he appeared in, with a guarantee of no less than 25 grand per show. So it's clear that it was in Hogan's best interests for people to attend shows and buy pay-per-views at home. And while gambling on the NWO wasn't a necessity, you can see that Hulk stood to make much more money if he and WCW was a success. When fans were getting tired of Hulkamania, you best believe he would hitch a ride with the NWO in hopes that shocking the world and becoming a heel would make people tune into WCW shows and buy pay-per-view shows. But still, the decision to turn heel didn't come easy to Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, they were talking about that in that documentary.
Hulk was, and still is, very aware of how lucrative the Hulk Hogan brand is. During his time in the WWF, the man became a household name, and even still in the mid-90s, his name carried weight. Hogan had been smart and savvy enough to protect the Hulkamania image both on a commercial level and by making sure he'd done what was right for Hulk Hogan in the ring, and if he were to turn into a bad guy, there was a serious threat there that this very image would be somewhat cheapened. The decision that Hulk Hogan had to make was, in very simplified terms, based on risk versus reward. Does he risk the Hulkamania empire for the possibility of higher pay bonuses with WCW while adding a new layer to his character? Or does he keep the red and yellow image and mildly successful endorsements, simply coasting along and collecting guaranteed money? To put it in perspective, Kevin Sullivan revealed that Hulk Hogan's agent, Peter Young, actually cried on the phone to him until 2:30 in the morning that WCW should not and could not turn Hulk Hogan heel.
Dang.
Scott Hall and Kevin Nash arrived in WCW in the summer of 1996, claiming they were in World Championship Wrestling with the intention of taking over the company. Hall and Nash had been successful in the WWF as Razor Ramon and Diesel, and they said they had another partner who would be revealed at WCW Bash at the Beach 96.
Bro, this
Rumors
story
were
arc,
rampant
man.
of who the third man could be.
This
with
story arc
Sting,
is so
Bret
lit.
Hart, and even Davey Boy Smith being names that seemed to constantly creep up. Scott Hall said, "We had no idea who it was going to be. The whole third guy thing came up by accident. I remember Kev and I called Brett and I spoke to him. Kev spoke to him and we told him it was really fun working at WCW. It was really laid back, guaranteed money. It was easy. We were so used to being in a Shark Tank in New York. Coming to Atlanta was like being in a country club. It was really tame in the locker room in WCW compared to New York. We told Brett he should come down." Bischoff was interested. He was offering him a pretty sweet deal, but Brett wasn't interested. "We wanted it to be Hulk, but Hulk had creative control in his contract, so he didn't have to do anything he didn't want to do."
Yeah.
We went to the ring. We hadn't even met Hulk yet. I met him briefly at WrestleMania 9, but I didn't know Hulk. We actually went to the ring in Daytona, and Hogan wasn't even there yet. He was on a jet, flying cross-country from shooting a movie. Bischoff wanted it to be Hulk before we went out. Bischoff told us, if Hulk doesn't show, I'm going to send out Sting.
It was gonna be Sting. Yeah, that's crazy. Think about that, man. So the original NWO was Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Hulk Hogan, but Sting was in that match. So if Hulk Hogan didn't come out, they were going they said Sting was ready to pretty much go ahead and join the NWO if Hulk Hogan decided not to. And then that's why I said in that documentary, Evil, it was so uptight in the back, and it was like nobody knew that Hulk was going to do it until he did it. So, bro, it's crazy just knowing the realism behind that. It made this story even better.
Going back a little, Eric Bischoff revealed in his book that he had meetings with Hulk in Hulk's home regarding the Hulkster becoming the third man in the New World Order. Hogan apparently wasn't sold on the idea initially, mainly due to being the good guy in wrestling was what gave him his fame and fortune. Bischoff left Hogan's house without a straight answer, and it was days later when Hogan picked up the phone and confirmed to Eric that he was going to turn heel. As Scott Hall mentioned, Eric was still wary of Hogan changing his mind or not even showing up at Bash at the Beach. So if Hogan didn't show or if Hogan changed his mind, Sting would have been the third man. Crazy to think that even if a plane was delayed or if Hogan slept in that day, then the future of WCW would have looked way, way different.
That is crazy.
Eric Bischoff said on his 83
man.
Weeks podcast, "I think at the time, probably a week before Bash at the Beach, is when I started letting people know about Hulk. I think I let Kevin Nash know. I know I was out in Los Angeles doing something because we met for a beer at Sunset Boulevard at some biker bar. I wasn't sure if it was going to be Hulk Hogan or Sting.
If y'all can even hear that.
One was plan A and the other was plan B. I tried to let Kevin know how much he should know, and the other part was because I was worried he would leak it out. So it was probably a week before I let those that needed to know that Hogan was going to be the third member."
Man, listen, you couldn't have done that today. when I tell you the dirt sheets, everybody would have known everything before it happened. Look at Cody Rhodes. Like, we already know that he's a part of the WWE. We already know that it's probably going to be Seth Rollins that he's facing at WrestleMania. I actually like the surprise factor. So, and I get it. News outlets, you have a job. You're trying to be the first one to break some news. I get it. But in all honesty, man, I would much rather I would just like the reaction. So with this happening back in the day, there wasn't as many, social media. Everybody wasn't a reporter. So it was probably a lot easier to get that off, but the impact so much better. Like, to see Hogan just leg drop Macho Man, like, nobody was expecting that. Like, nobody. I missed that part of wrestling, man. I missed that. AEW gets it right, though.
The Bash at the Beach and turned into a bad guy. Against his agent's wishes, Hulk Hogan felt that this could be the shot of adrenaline his WCW career needed. Hogan stood in the middle of the ring and called the fans trash while reminding them that they turned their back on Hulkamania. When he walked out wearing
classic
all
heel
black
turn
on Nitro, it really hit home for a lot of people that the unthinkable had happened. The American hero of wrestling wasn't a hero anymore. He had a real disdain for some of the fans that hung on to his every word back in the 80s and early 90s. Needless to say, Hulk Hogan turning heel and forming the New World Order with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall was the right move.
Oh, yes.
Hogan became not only relevant again, but he became the talk of the entire wrestling industry. And you gotta think that Hulk Hogan, now known as Hollywood Hulk Hogan, was thinking of his bank balance as the headlines came rolling in from the wrestling magazines at the time. His mission now was to stay relevant while hoping that WCW shows would sell out and people would buy the pay-per-views at home. His financial interest in the success of WCW was just too great to ignore.
Alright, we gonna stop it right there, y'all. But man, like, you can't tell me that wasn't one of the most classic heel turns of all time. Like, me going back now and realizing the gravity of everything, knowing the behind the scenes information, knowing that if it was going to be Sting, if it wasn't Hulk Hogan, if he decided to change his mind because of his contract, it stated that he had complete creative control over what he did. So if he didn't want to do that, he didn't have to. Like, boy, this is why I love going back and like learning all of this stuff in hindsight, man. That's crazy. But what is you guys' favorite part of today's video? And how many of y'all, were on board with, because for some people who were watching this live, were you on board with Hogan turning heel, or was it one of those like you pretty much marked out and you was pissed that they actually got Hogan to turn heel? Like, let me know down in the comments, man. Big shout out to Wrestling Bios for putting this together. We're only 30 minutes into the documentary and it's still 3 hours left, damn near. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Definitely consider subscribing if you're enjoying the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you all back in the ring. Y'all have a good one.